I'm a postdoctoral fellow in clinical psychology at Stanford University, and I've also treated hundreds of patients across a number of different mental health concerns. And today I'll be talking about 12 mental health tips that you can incorporate into your life even today to boost your mental health. So let's get into it. And just as a quick disclaimer, I do want to highlight that you don't have to incorporate all of these activities into your daily life. Even if it's well intentioned, when we try to do too much, that can lead to burnout, which is counterproductive to the idea of good mental health. So I encourage you to almost choose your own adventure when it comes to these activities and think about which one feels right for my life, which ones resonate with me the most, because at the end of the day, I might know a little bit about mental health, but you are the expert of yourself. So choose the ones that work for you. So the first mental health tip I have for you is to engage in behaviors that either accumulate positive emotions or build mastery. And what I mean by that are these are activities that either give us a sense of joy or happiness or pleasure, or activities that give us a sense of self-efficacy and competence, like learning a new language or learning a new instrument or cleaning our room. And the pleasurable activities could be things like getting your favorite Starbucks drink or taking a really nice walk with friends or watching your favorite movie. Those are the things that give us either a sense of pleasure or a sense of mastery. And the reason why accumulating positive emotions and building up mastery can be really helpful is oftentimes we feel depleted in our daily life. And when we feel depleted and not very nourished, it's easy for life's hassles and stressors, even the smallest thing can make us kind of feel really, really bad. So by engaging in these nourishing activities, things that make us feel good and feel a sense of competence, we reduce emotional vulnerability and we're able to handle life stressor. And as Benjamin Franklin once said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound in cure. A second mental health tip is to be curious and experiment in your daily life. So the reason why I say this is because oftentimes we make predictions, usually negative ones, about how our life will go and how things will go if we were to do something new. Like for example, if I were to try out this new restaurant, I'm not gonna like it. If I were to watch a movie by myself, it's gonna be a very awkward situation. Or if I were to ask that person out, they're gonna say no. So we're constantly making these predictions, but we don't really know what's gonna happen. So one strategy that can be really helpful is to say, you know what? I don't actually know what is going to happen, so why don't I give this thing a shot? Why don't I try out that new bubble tea flavor or try out that new cafe or make the call without making a lot of preparation and just see what happens? And the reason why these behavioral experiments can be so darn helpful is that it actually allows us to feel a little bit differently about the unknown and about uncertainty. Usually we think of uncertainty as something that's negative or things are going to always go wrong, but here we're allowing ourselves to be curious scientists and giving it a shot anyway. And as Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, all life is an experiment, and the more experiments that you make, the better. So a third therapy tip that I often find very helpful is something called opposite action, otherwise known as opposite to emotion action, where essentially we do the opposite of what our emotions are telling us. Usually we follow what the emotions tell us, like for example, anxiety tells us to run away, sadness tells us to withdraw and kind of lie down and do nothing for the day, but sometimes it can be helpful to do the opposite of what that emotion tells us, because sometimes anxiety is right, like if there's a snake around, we don't want to be around and we want to run away. On the other hand, if it tells us we shouldn't make a call, otherwise we're going to make a mistake, then maybe in this case, we might want to actually not always honor exactly what the anxiety is telling us, or if it tells us something that is not particularly helpful for your life, like to avoid all conversations with people because you're afraid of embarrassing yourself, in that case, again, anxiety might be less helpful. So in these cases, we might actually want to act opposite to what the emotion is telling us, what the fatigue is telling us, what sadness is telling us, what anxiety is telling us, and do the opposite, and just to see how behaviors can actually impact how we feel. And the reason why opposite action works is because sometimes our emotions are kind of like a self-perpetuating cycle. It actually maintains itself. Like depression tells us to keep lying down, anxiety tells us to keep avoiding, and as a result, we kind of stay with that anxiety, we kind of stay with that sadness in the long term. So sometimes it can be nice to act opposite to it to see if we can create a little bit of momentum to break us out of the vicious cycle. And one small way that you can incorporate opposite action even in this moment is that if you're feeling a little bit sad and depressed, is to actually act opposite to that emotion by putting on a small half smile and putting your hands up like this on top of your lap so your palms are up, and see if that actually changes your emotion just a little bit as you're engaging in that through this video. So a fourth mental health tip is to avoid avoiding. So we all have times when we're putting something off that there's a bit of a gnawing feeling that we know we need to do something, but maybe we're watching this video to avoid doing that thing, but we know that if we would just did it, we would feel a lot better in the long term. But we're avoiding it, which is giving a little bit of short-term relief, like we're not feeling fully in distress, even if we have that gnawing feeling. But we know that if we just did that thing, like sent that email or made that application or had that hard conversation, we would feel a lot better. So one thing that I would encourage you to do is to to avoid avoiding by approaching the issue and doing that one thing that you know is causing you a little bit of that long-term distress. So the fifth mental health tip is actually related to our overall energy throughout the day. So oftentimes people think that energy is kind of like a battery where if we just had a great night's sleep, then we should have 100% and we expend that throughout the day, like 50% for work or 25% for going to the gym, 10% for chores, and then we end up with like zero at the end of the day. But actually, I don't think energy works that way. In fact, energy I think works more like a generator rather than a battery. And sometimes we need input into the generator to get it to start going. So for example, if you're feeling really low, it can often be helpful to move around just a little bit, get some engagement going so that you have some input into the generator to build up that momentum. On the other hand, there are some people who do way too much. They have way too much input into their generator, and it's actually overheating them and leading to burnout. So for them, they might actually benefit from a little bit of time to nourish themselves, taking a planned rest time, taking 20 minutes to lie down with a nice music or something on to help support a nourished body. And a sixth mental health tip, as simple as it sounds, is simply to get a little bit of sunlight in the morning. And the reason why this is so helpful is that it really strongly sets our circadian clock, our internal clock that tells us when we should be awake and when we should be asleep, by being kind of like the strongest timekeeper, which is light. And by doing so, it gives our body a really strong sense of rhythm as to when we should be awake, when we should be asleep, and reduces the time we spend in this sort of transitional period between sleep and wake, where we feel this sort of sense of grogginess. And sunlight really helps reduce that time we're in sleep inertia and allows us to feel more refreshed earlier rather than later. And a seventh mental health tip is to figure out what your values are and engage in one activity every single day that is consistent with your values. And what I mean by values are these important life concepts that give our life a sense of meaning. So they could be things like family or relationships or health or adventure or creativity, whatever that is for you. It's highly individualized, but what I encourage you to do is to reflect on what are the things that are truly important to you, what are your values, and pick one activity that is consistent with that value. So if your value is, for example, health, then you might take a 10-minute walk every single day. Or if it's family, you might call your mom or dad every day or every night for at least 15 minutes. And this commitment to our values kind of reminds me of the quote by Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who basically said, just do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. So as long as you're following your life concepts, what's truly important to you, your values, the rest doesn't matter. The rest is something that we can't control, but what you can control are that you're making sure to do the things that are truly important to you. So an eighth mental health strategy that can be quite helpful is the use of something called the worry time. So the worry time or worry journaling is to take a specific circumscribed time during the evening where your job is literally just to worry and write down all your worries. So instead of worrying throughout the day, worrying at night when you're supposed to be sleeping, you're just taking this time from, let's say, 7 to 7:15 or 8 to 8:10, whatever that might be for you, and take a journal and write down all the worries that could be bothering you. These could be productive worries about the next day and writing down their solution, like needing to set an appointment, or they could be hypothetical worries, worries about the future and the uncertainty of it all and your child's future, and just being able to allow yourself to process and write down the emotions associated with that. And we find that super helpful for both processing all the crap that's happening to us, all the stressors that are happening, as well as being able to solve some of the problems for the next day so we can go to bed with a quiet mind. And while we're on this topic of going to bed with this sort of quiet mind, another strategy is to make sure that you're giving yourself a little bit of a buffer room, maybe 30 minutes to an hour before bed, so that you can engage in something that is relaxing and enjoyable, something that allows you to wind down, whether it's playing guitar, watching a nice rerun of Friends, whatever that works for you, helps to kind of quiet your mind, relax the body before you go to bed, because going to bed with relatively low levels of arousal will allow and support a much more restful night's sleep. So a 10th mental health tip is to actually incorporate some amount of mindfulness into your daily life. So usually when we go about life, we're kind of on autopilot mode. Like we're not really here in the present moment. We're either worrying about the future, ruminating about the past. We're never really here in the here and now, or we're kind of like multitasking and doing a bunch of things at once. And the thing about mindfulness is that it tells us to be more aware and intentional to be in our present moment. And it doesn't even have to be something like a 10-minute mindfulness meditation where you have to like sit down for 10 minutes, but it can even be infused into your daily life and into your daily activity. Like, for example, when you're driving or listening to music or taking a walk, being mindful just means being here in the present moment, getting out of autopilot and into our lives. So, for example, if you're listening to me right now and you're fully engaged in what I'm saying and you're not like scrolling also on your phone or doing something else or doing homework, then you are being mindful by being in this present moment and participating with me in this activity. And the 11th mental health tip is also kind of related to this idea of mindfulness and engaging and being present with an activity is the act of savoring an activity. So for example, the next time you are looking at a flower, see if you can really savor the experience of looking at that flower. Or if you happen to wake up at 5 a.m. and it's a little bit cold in your bedroom, maybe you can even savor that feeling of like comfort on your pillow, that sort of warmness of your blanket, really be in that moment. Or if you're drinking a cup of tea, really kind of savor what that feels like, or eating food, whatever that might be. See if you can really be in the present moment and observe all of the qualities and really feel fused with the present moment and with the activity and get all the joy and pleasure from that activity. And one small way that you can engage in savoring is that even after this video, you might go to another YouTube channel with your favorite song and just like really be in the present moment with that song and savor the music, savor the lyrics, savor the melodies, and see how that feels for you to really be in that moment, enjoy that song to its fullest. And finally, the 12th and final tip I'll offer to you is to tackle any obstacles that might get in the way of you doing these other things. Because it's possible at this point you're like, yeah, that was nice, but I don't really want to do any of that, at least right now. Or, this is not going to help me anyway. And it's possible that those negative cognitions might actually make it hard for you to see change in your life. So see if you can kind of take more of that curious scientist perspective, give things a shot, and just allow yourself to see whether or not something can benefit you or not. And there it is, 12 mental health tips that you can incorporate into your life even today that will help boost your mental health. And remember, you don't have to do all 12 of them. Even one of them is going to be awesome. And maybe you can let me know in the comment section below what you ended up doing and how that worked for you. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.